Blackbird Farm, July 1st, 2014. Later. Agnes, Redwood Farm Supply, Gravenstein, California, 95472. Dear Agnes, I guess you probably already know how poultry shows work, but I didn't. What happens, here at least, is that there's a big room with a lot of wire cages in it, all different sizes for different kinds of poultry. There's an area for the show part where the judging happens, where you pay money and might win ribbons. And that's very quiet, and you feel like you should tiptoe and whisper. Well, aside from the chickens and the ducks and all that, chickens and ducks are never quiet. Emus are usually pretty quiet, though, it turns out, except when they make these weird, gurgly, boomy noises. Anyway, then there's this other half of the room, where I was, which is mostly kids, and chickens and ducks and turkeys and geese, and I think maybe quail and also one ostrich, where nobody is very quiet at all. As soon as the kids started coming in to set up, I could see they all knew each other, and a lot of them had fancy signs about their chickens and even decorations for their cages and stuff. My stomach felt pretty bad, and I'd had a really long day, and I didn't really want to talk about any of it. I decided Miss Grigson probably couldn't steal my chickens in front of everybody, and I didn't see her around anyway, and my chickens were all fluffed up together having naps, not doing anything unusual, and no one was paying any attention to them with an ostrich and everything else here. So I walked around and looked at all the poultry. I don't know what makes a chicken win a ribbon or not. Maybe good behavior? I was kind of relieved my chickens were not in the part for awards, even if they were pretty tired out from their adventures. They're certainly not obedient. Then I saw Miss Grigson's Rhode Island Reds. I mean, the ones she brought, not all of them. I don't know if the one that chased us is the only one that turns into a hawk. None of them turned into anything else at the show, though. At least not while I was watching. When I finished walking around the room, I saw that Chris was setting up. He looked at me sort of nervous when he saw me, so I told him my chickens were fine now. He bit his lip and looked at his sneakers. "Want to see my surprise?" he asked, like he thought I might say no. But I said sure. I was too tired and nervous to be mad. He had 6 chicks that looked like they had fluffy hats on, with a special red light and everything to keep them warm. They're a kind of Polish chicken that gets fancy hairdos when they're older. Or feather doos? Fluffy feathers on their head, anyway, like wigs. I guess his mom must have felt pretty bad about what happened to Buffy's chicks. He was pretty proud of his new chicks, and lots of kids came by to see them, but I think he only let me hold him. Them. They're the softest, fluffiest things ever, like pom-poms, even if they do poop on your hands sometimes. I love my chickens best, of course, but his were really cute. And I think they're only regular unusual, though, not super unusual. I watched them pretty carefully, and I think I would have noticed. Then the presentation started, and my stomach felt a whole lot worse. I really, really don't like talking in front of people. Miss O'Malley asked for volunteers, and an older girl's hand shot up. I listened a little bit. I never knew someone could know that much about regular old geese. My stomach wasn't feeling any better, though, so I went to find Gregory. I borrowed some paper and a pen from him so I could make notes. Ever since the time I couldn't remember a single thing about Benjamin Franklin and almost cried in front of the whole 3rd grade from embarrassment, I always wrote notes. When I walked back to where my chickens were, Miss Grigson was standing in front of their cage looking at them. You know, she didn't really look like a mean lady. She just looked kind of sad. And if she just asked me when I first found them, I might even have let her have my chickens. I bet she's better at taking care of them than me. But those are not her chickens, not even if she really wants them. So just taking them isn't fair. I've thought about it a lot, and she just can't go around breeding dangerous unknown super chicken mixes that would have to get killed like Buffy's chicks. I have enough problems these days keeping my chickens safe, and I've seen those superhero movies. I don't need the army and SWAT teams after my chickens, too. When she saw me, she crossed her arms, but she didn't move away from my chickens. So when Miss O'Malley asked for the next volunteer, even though my stomach was turning over and over like that spinning ride my cousin Javier threw up on, I raised my hand. Chris raised his hand, too. He looked really excited to talk about his chicks. Miss O'Malley called on him, but he looked over at me, putting my hand down, and he saw Miss Grigson standing next to my chickens, and he said, "Sophie can go. I'll go after her." Then everybody looked at me. I said, "Hello, I'm Sophie Brown." But my voice was quiet and squeaky and shaky all at once, and I thought for a minute about just turning around and leaving. But Gregory gave me a big nod, just like my teacher, Mr. Hightower, at my science fair in LA. I'd lived through that, and my parents had arrived now too. I saw them in the back. They smiled at me. So I took a deep breath and I looked down at my notes, like Mr. Hightower taught me. And here's what I said. "Hello, I'm Sophie Brown. These are my chickens. I inherited them from my great uncle, Uncle Jim Brown, when he died. That's why they might look familiar. Henrietta is a bantam white leghorn. Chameleon is a barred rock. Roadrunner's a bantam black frizzle cochin." Miss O'Malley said, "Coochine, Sophie, not cochin," really loudly, and Mom glared at her. I got confused for a minute and lost my place in my notes. Then I found my place again and kept going. "Buffy is a buff Orpington, and these three are speckled Sussex. I'm not sure what their names are yet. They're all laying hens." I took a quick glance at the chickens. They were still just sitting there, thank goodness. I don't know what I would have done if Henry had gotten mad. Then I looked at the crowd. Gregory nodded again, and my mom waved, and my dad gave me a big thumbs up. But Miss Grigson was still there, with her arms crossed, just looking at me and my chickens and waiting. One thing both my parents agree on is this. If people are doing something unfair, it's part of our job to remind them of what is fair, even if sometimes things still don't turn out the way we want them to. So I looked up at all those farm people and kids I don't know yet, and I swallowed down my wiggly stomach and I said, "Now that you know these are my chickens, will you help me watch over them? It seems like someone's been trying to steal them." I didn't look at Miss Grigson. I know people would rather believe that the person they know than the person they don't know, especially if the person they don't know is just a kid. But everyone looked at her anyway. I don't know if it was because she's in charge of the poultry show or because Miss O'Malley was glaring at her. I was kind of worried my parents would say something, but they just looked at her too. Miss Grigson got pretty still. "That's a very serious thing to say, Sophie. I know you're new here, and my guess is there's been a mistake. We can talk more about it after the show." She turned to Chris, and everyone else looked at him too. "Your turn, Chris." But Chris was still looking at me. "If there's a chicken thief in the area, I think we should hear about it," he said. And I forgave him right then and there for riding off and leaving me alone earlier. Sometimes people just need a little time to figure out what's right. "Exactly what I was going to say," Miss O'Malley said loudly. "Sophie is not the kind of girl who makes things up." And everyone looked back at me, even Miss Grigson. She took a deep breath, and I kept going, even though I didn't have notes about this part. "I think you all know that Great Uncle Jim has unusual chickens. They've been finding their way home to our farm, so now I'm taking care of them. I'd really appreciate it if you'd help me keep them safe." I've never heard a pin drop, but I bet I could have heard one if there was one around that happened to be dropping. People stopped looking at me, but they sure looked at my chickens. Well, all except my parents, who looked pretty confused. Everyone waited. I think they guessed what I meant by unusual, even if they didn't exactly know the details, and even if no one talks about it. After a minute, Miss Grigson uncrossed her arms and smiled at me. "Sophie, I'm certain you're learning all you can, but you're very new to farming, and these are not exactly beginner's chickens. Jim Brown was a poultry expert. If they're getting away from you already, perhaps the best way we can help you keep them safe is by taking care of them when you start with something nice and easy. I'm sure we could find you some beautiful comet chicks." I didn't trust my voice not to shake, so I put my hand on top of the wire cage with my chickens in it and shook my head. The speckled Sussex were distracting me, huddling at one end and clucking. I hoped they weren't going to do anything unusual that I couldn't handle right then. But before I could really think about it, I opened my mouth and said, "Agnes said they were mine. She told me not to give them to anyone." So much for pins dropping. It was like wind rushed through a noisy tree in the fall, every leaf muttering something to its neighbor. Everyone except Miss Grigson. who put her hand on my chicken's cage too. But how? Without taking my eyes off of her, I told the crowd, I know these chickens are a big responsibility. That's why I need you all to help me. Will you help me keep them safe? Of course we will, Miss O'Malley said at once. Yeah, shouted Chris. And Gregory nodded, and my parents looked confused, but they nodded too. And I saw that girl with the llama book, and she was nodding, and so was Jane from the feed store, and the black lady in the business suit standing next to her smiled and nodded at me, and all around the room, all those people I'd seen in town but didn't really know started nodding too. And then they all looked at Miss Grigson. I couldn't help but stare at her too. I just waited, and I wouldn't look away. I'm not an expert like my mom is, but I guess I'm still better at waiting than Miss Grigson. Everyone else quieted down eventually, and they waited too. Finally, she looked up from my chickens. She took her hand off their cage and looked out at all those people who were looking at her and waiting. Then she took a step back. Of course, we wouldn't tolerate a chicken thief in our community, Sophie. Thank you for alerting us. Everyone, please let me know immediately if you see any signs of theft or any poultry go missing. And she took 3 more steps away from my chickens and joined the crowd. There was a gust of wind through the room, and my chickens made a racket when it blew through their cage. Then they settled down, even the speckled Sussex, and went back to sleep. I was so relieved I kind of wanted to throw up. My stomach had really been through a lot today. But I thanked everyone, even Miss Grigson, and my parents started to clap really loudly, and Miss Grigson hurried over to Chris's chicks and told him to go ahead. But he waited until everyone had finished clapping for me before he started. A lot of people came up to me later and told me how good it was to see Jim Brown's chickens at the show again, and what a loss his death was to the community. I didn't really know what to say, so I just said thank you. I met a nice reporter named Joy who was doing an article for the paper on the poultry show. She took a picture of me with my chickens, and she said she'd put it in the paper so everyone will know they're mine. She speaks Spanish, but she's not from LA or Mexico. She's Filipina, but it was still nice to hear some Spanish again. I told her my mom's a writer too, and I saw them talking together later. Maybe Mom will get to write about poultry shows too one day, and she'll take me with her when she goes to cover the story, like she used to sometimes. Miss O'Malley introduced me to a lot of other adult chicken people who arrived later as Jim Brown's grandniece who inherited his chickens and his good poultry sense. I think she said this extra loud when Miss Grigson was nearby, which I guess was nice of her. Apparently, she doesn't really get along that well with Miss Grigson. When people looked at me all surprised, she'd add in a loud whisper, Sophie's mother's from Mexico. I gave up trying to explain that really Mom's from LA and it was my grandma, but whatever. People will work it out for themselves eventually. I was glad my parents came, though, and I was really relieved they didn't see anything about the 3 extra chickens. They aren't really chicken people yet, so maybe they didn't notice. Or maybe they just guessed I'd kind of had a hard day. But they both said I did a really good job, and they were proud of me, and that my voice was hardly shaking at all. Neither of them said one word to Miss Grigson. Dad had a really good time talking to everyone. I guess I hadn't realized he was kind of lonely too. Jane from the feed store came up and gave me a big hug and told me I did great, and introduced us to her girlfriend, Violet, who was still in her city work clothes. Violet told Dad some of the tricks Great Uncle Jim used to run the farm by himself. Like that thing that isn't a tractor, it's a harvester. Dad said maybe I could drive it too if Mom said it was okay, after Violet teaches him how to work on it. Chris introduced me to some of the other kids. Some of them had some nice-looking chickens, and the girl with the llama book really does have a llama, a brown one. The girl's name is Sarah, and her llama's name is Ella. Did you know some people have guard llamas for their sheep? Samantha wasn't sure if Ella would know how to guard against chicken thieves, but she said if I have any more trouble to let her know, and she'd look it up in a book. She didn't bring Ella to the poultry show, though, because llamas are not poultry, obviously. I guess I'll talk to them more when I start school in the fall. And Gregory stayed through the whole thing, too. Did you know Gregory raises cow ducks? They're cute, but man, are they loud. And he asked for my recipe for migas. I know Gregory will love them. Agnes, I'm not quite sure how to ask you this, but are you dead? I mean, I don't think that's a very polite question under normal circumstances, but I heard a guy telling someone else something about before old Miss Taylor died, and he gave me a funny look. It gave me quite a turn, just like my grandmother always said, so I didn't ask him about it. If you are dead, I guess I don't expect you to answer. But, well, I don't know. I'm not even sure why I keep writing to you. It seems like you'd want to know, but maybe not anymore. Your friend forever, Sophie. P.S. I guess it's okay if you can't send me lessons anymore. I'll keep getting books from the library. And Gregory said maybe he'll even start another 4-H poultry club on a different day, since the other one's pretty full and there might be kids that can't go on Wednesday evenings. He mostly knows about ducks, but I guess he could read up on chickens. P.P.S. Why do you think the speckled Sussex keep following me into the barn and going up into the loft? It is a real pain to get them down the ladder, I tell you, and I don't want them making a mess up here. But don't worry, they're all back where they belong and nobody got hurt. Here's an entry that looks like it's cut from a newspaper. Gravenstein Independent Journal, July 2nd, 2014. Sophie Brown, 12, carrying on her great-uncle Jim's chicken farm tradition. Note, Miss Brown alerted the community to a poultry thief in the area. Citizens are encouraged to report any suspicious behavior to the Rural Crime Prevention Unit, as well as notifying the Poultry Association president and vice president. Help keep our farms safe. Poultry Show encourages kids to farm by Joy Ocampo. Young poultry farmers were encouraged to bring their birds to Gravenstein Poultry Show this year, and over 15 young people, aged 5 to 18, participated. Community events such as these encourage kids to value farm life, says Mayor. Continue on page 12, which it does not. Blackbird Farm, July 5th, 2014. Agnes Taylor, I think. Redwood Farm Supply, Gravenstein, California, 95472. Dear Agnes, I think I'm starting to understand it now. The speckled Sussex finally found what they were looking for. The old typewriter I have in the loft. They kept pecking and pecking at the keys until finally I put some more paper in it to show them how it's done. I typed, "The quick brown fox jumps over the lazy dog," like Mom taught me, to check that they hadn't messed up the keys. And then a little bit of exclamation marks and other stuff for emphasis. I left the paper in the typewriter and got them all back down again. But later this afternoon, I saw the barn door had swung open, so I went back up and I found them, and this letter in the typewriter. So I read it. Thanks for letting me know. Your friend, Sophie. Here's what the typewriter said. "The quick brown fox jumps over the lazy dog. Exclamation mark, money sign, question mark, exclamation mark, and parentheses. Dear Sophie, comma, dot, dot, comma, dot, dot. I'm afraid I am dead. Don't bother asking me about what it's like after death or any of that, comma, comma, period, comma. There was a sharp pain one day, 777, and then things got pretty blurry for a while, 77, and then Gregory came into the barn saying I had mail. And when I tried to pick it up, my hands went right, 7, through it. Sorry about the delay in answering your letters, exclamation mark, 137. It took me a bit to train the speckled Sussex. They can't do capitals, 77, and sometimes they peck the wrong keys, comma, comma, bother, comma, dot, period. In case you haven't guessed, they can see ghosts. So I can show them which keys to hit. But they don't usually type, and they aren't any better at understanding ghost people than other chickens. So it's a slow process, typing, and I couldn't write at all after they'd been taken away. SSDSA. About Sue Grigson. Sue used to work for me, // It's not so much that she is a bad person as that she makes bad decisions. She shouldn't have stolen your chickens, no matter how much she wanted them. You know that. She doesn't. YTTT. You've done brilliantly. I had no idea you'd have such a time of it, nor that you'd manage so well. I'm going to try and get this Sussex to write a few more letters for you to make things easier. But, Sophie, I'm not sure I'll be around much longer. I feel faded around the edges, 777, and like I've finished things up. Maybe I'll have that next adventure after all. Would you please put a fresh sheet of paper in the typewriter when you can? Then please mail the letter to the address at the top, 7 apostrophe, when it's done. Thank you. Your friend always, Agnes. P.S. Jim says he's proud of you, 7-7. Thanks for taking care of the chickens. Also, tell your dad the bird netting is in the back of the loft, 7 and 7. Put it on right away if he wants any grapes this year. PPPSSP. The other lessons are in the filing cabinet in my barn. Gregory can show you. You have my permission, and please tell Gregory thanks. Then there's another one of those pages that looks all messy. It says, Messrs. Doherty, 1011 Sunnyside Drive, Santa Rosa, California, 95405. Dear Messrs. Doherty, I, Agnes Taylor, do leave to Miss Sophie Brown the remainder of my poultry business, formerly known as Redwood Farm, including all my remaining poultry currently held by other keepers. It will need to be held for her until she comes of legal age by her parents, who seem to have pretty good sense for non-poultry people. However, they cannot sell it or give it away. It must be held for her until such time as she herself comes of age and decides what to do with it. Also, please send that letter you have on file to the list of addresses we discussed. I know you may be somewhat surprised to receive this missive from me at this point, but that is how I wished it to be done. Surely you must agree it will be easiest for all concerned to just follow my instructions. Sincerely, Agnes Taylor. P.S. In case you do not believe this is really me, I conclude with the following. Mr. Thornton Doherty tried to kiss me in the barn when we were 12. I punched him in the eye. I never told anyone, and I suspect he never did either, since the rumor was he was hit by a barn shutter. Blackbird Farm, July 10th, 2014. Agnes Taylor, wherever you are. Dear Agnes, I want you to know that it's okay if you can't stay. I guess no one can stay forever. I have a lot of questions for you still, but maybe they'll just continue to be part of the mystery. I mailed your letter like you asked me to, and today a big fancy letter came to me on the kind of paper my mom says is a huge waste of money, saying I'd inherited your business. My parents were pretty surprised. I don't really want to know what Miss Gregson will say. Gregory's going to come over later and take me for a tour, since he has a key to take care of your chickens and knows them pretty well. I think that's very nice of him. I appreciate that he didn't try to explain that you were dead. I feel like Gregory's the kind of person who understands that life's just more mysterious than most people think, and it's okay to leave it like that. I think I'm going to try and be like that too. So, all I wanted to say is thank you. Your friend forever, Sophie. P.S. I may not be an exceptional poultry farmer just yet, but I promise I will try and learn everything I can so I can become one soon. P.P.S. I asked Gregory if he had any tips on how to be an exceptional poultry farmer. He gave me a big nod and said he thought I was doing fine. I do like Gregory. P.P.P.S. If you ever do meet my grandmother, wherever you go, would you please tell her I love her very much and that I'm doing fine? Miss Sophie Brown, Blackbird Farm, 7777, Pacific Highway 116, Gravenstein, California, 95472. July 29th, 2014. Dear Miss Sophie Brown, I understand you have inherited Agnes's chickens. Please email me to tell me where to send the ones I was holding for her. You'll want to keep them separate from the others, particularly from the ones Betty has. I'm sure you'll hear from her soon. Best of luck to you. Sincerely, Hortensia James. H. James at apeculiarkindofbird.com. The end. There is another book in this series that I'm working on getting. Feel free to let me know if you think we should read it together, or if it's one that maybe some of you would just like to read on your own. If you have a strong opinion, go ahead and let me know. Hope you enjoyed the book. Bye, everyone.